Today's lesson is on multiplying and dividing fractions. So make sure you title your notes. And first we'll look at multiplying fractions. So here we have 4/15 times 5/9. When you're multiplying fractions, all you need to do is multiply straight across. So you'll multiply the numerators and then you'll multiply the denominators. You don't even need to find a common denominator. You can just multiply right away. So 4 times 5 in the numerator would be 20, and 15 times 9 in the denominator would be 135. Now this is not your final answer yet because both of these numbers, we can simplify this fraction, both of these numbers are divisible by 5. So 20 divided by 5 would be 4, and 135 divided by 5 would be 27. So 4/27 is our final answer. Now notice what we did here was we took the two fractions, we multiplied them first, then we took this answer here and we simplified it. I'm going to take this same problem but show you another way of doing it so that you don't have to deal with such large numbers here. So same problem, 4/15 times 5/9. What we can do is we can simplify first and then multiply. Let me show you what I mean. You want to look at the numbers that are across from each other. So 4 and 9. You want to ask yourself, do 4 and 9 have any other common factors besides 1? In this case, they don't. The only common factor for 4 and 9 is 1, so we can't simplify it. But if I look over here at the other two numbers that are across from each other, 15 and 5, they do have another common factor besides 1. They are both divisible by 5. So now I can simplify this first before I multiply. So 5 divided by 5 up here would simplify to 1, and 15 divided by 5 would simplify to 3, which would look like this. So now when I multiply, I'll multiply 4 times 1, which is 4, and I'll multiply 3 times 9, which is 27. I get the final answer right away. So I simplified first and then multiplied. It's completely up to you, whichever one you prefer. All right, let's talk about dividing fractions next. But before we do that, let me explain a real world problem here so this makes a little bit more sense. Let's say that you had 6 Snickers bars, but you had more friends and you wanted to split them amongst all your friends. So you decided to cut all your Snickers bars in half. So what you really did was you took 6 Snickers bars and you divided them all by 1/2. Now how many Snicker bars did you end up with now? Well, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So when you took 6 and you divided by 1/2, you actually got 12. A lot of people think that 6 divided by 1/2 is 3. That is incorrect. What you have to ask yourself is how many halves can fit into 6? Well, there's 12 halves that can fit into 6. So picture the problem if you ever forget that. Now there is a way to solve this without drawing a picture every time, but before we get to that, you've got to understand what reciprocals are. So write down reciprocals, write down the fraction 7/4. Reciprocals are actually very easy. You take the fraction and you flip it upside down. So the reciprocal of 7/4 would be 4/7. Let me just do one more, make sure you understand this. If you have 1/2, the reciprocal, you want to flip it upside down, would be 2/1. Okay, so now let me show you how to do the division problem here. Our division problem that we started with was 6 divided by 1/2. The way that you divide fractions is you keep that first number the same, which was 6. You change your division to multiplication, and you take the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2/1. Now this gets a little tricky because do you multiply the 6 times 2 or the 6 times 1 or both, or what happens? So let's change 6 into a fraction so that it's a little bit easier to understand. Remember, when you have a whole number like this, 6, if we write it as a fraction, would just be 6/1, which is what I have here. Now we can multiply straight across so that 6 times 2 in the numerator is 12, and 1 times 1 in the denominator is 1, and 12/1 simplifies to 12, which is the exact same answer that we got with that Snickers bar problem. 6 divided by 1/2 is 12. All right, let's look at an example here. If you have 5/8 and you're dividing by 3/4, we want to change this to a multiplication problem and we want to change the 3/4 to the reciprocal. So you would keep the first number the same. 5/8 stays the same. You change your division to multiplication, and you change 3/4 to 4/3. Okay, so now that we have that, let's just look at that problem there. 5/8 times 4/3. Again, two ways of doing this. You can multiply straight across. So in the numerator, 5 times 4 is 20, and in the denominator, 8 times 3 is 24. Since both of these are divisible by 4, we can simplify it. 20 divided by 4 would be 5, and 24 divided by 4 would be 6. Final answer. Just to refresh your memory again, you could do the same thing. Once you change it to a multiplication problem, if you prefer to simplify first, you could do that as well. So look at the 5 and the 3. The only common factor is 1, so we cannot simplify. Look at the 4 and the 8. They both have a common factor of 4, so we could divide both of these by 4. 4 divided by 4 would be 1, and 8 divided by 4 would be 2. So now I'll multiply 5 times 1, which is 5, and 2 times 3, which is 6, and we get 5/6. Same answer, just depends whether you prefer to multiply then simplify or simplify then multiply. Alright, one last example here, 2 divided by 7/3. If you have a whole number divided by a fraction or multiplied by a fraction, you want to change that whole number into a fraction to make it easier. So remember, like we already talked about, to change 2 into a fraction, you would just change it to 2 over 1. So now we have 2 over 1 divided by 7/3, and we want to change that to a multiplication problem. So it'll stay 2 over 1. This part stays the same. You change your division into a multiplication problem, and then you take the reciprocal of 7/3, which is 3/7. Now we can multiply straight across. So in the numerator, 2 times 3 is 6, and 1 times 7 in the denominator is 7. That's the final answer. That's it for today, guys. Bye-bye.